Hi, I'm Dava,
And I'm Rob.
and this is our presentation on psilocybin and ego disillusionment. Psilocybin is a type of psychedelic drug. It can also be called mushrooms, magic mushrooms, or just shrooms. It originated in Mesoamerica around 3500 BCE, but it was only popularized in the USA in the 1950s by Robert Wasson. Shrooms are usually taken orally and eaten in a dried form alone or brewed into a tea. Psilocybin, the main ingredient, is converted into psilocin by MOA enzymes. It is lipid soluble, which means it can easily pass through the blood-brain barrier. Shrooms are processed through first-order kinetics and have a half-life of 50 minutes and are completely eliminated within 24 hours of consumption.
Psilocin acts as a serotonin agonist, increasing the effectiveness of serotonin on a range of receptors, but the primary receptor is 5-HT2A, which has been found to have both excitatory and inhibitory effects. After ingestion, behavioral effects can usually be felt within 30 to 90 minutes and reach a peak lasting anywhere from 3 to 6 hours. Physiological changes reflect an increase in physiological arousal, but also include nausea, vomiting, and drowsiness. Affective changes can be positive or negative depending on the individual and the individual trip, but people commonly report increased emotional excitability and a spiritual or mystical tone to their experiences. Cognitive changes include a distorted sense of time, synesthesia, for example, hearing colors, hallucinations, impaired attention, and a dreamlike state.
There is little evidence for abusive or addictive potential for psilocybin, but the current literature lacks research in this area. In terms of death, there are very few deaths attributed to the drug, but those that are not due to overdose, but from accidents that happen while high. Other phenomenons that occur while taking the drug that may prevent abuse are currently being studied.
So, what is ego disillusion? It's a loss of your sense of self, which can be described as a lack of boundaries between you and your surroundings, or just no longer feeling like an I or an individual. This experience can sometimes be profoundly spiritual and positive, but other times it can be incredibly distressing.
Drug experience can also be influenced by prior pre-existing mental health conditions. Most notably to me is narcissistic personality disorder. When experiencing ego death on mushrooms, people who have narcissistic personality disorder experience decreased levels of maladaptive narcissism as they experience more feeling of connectedness and oneness and increased level of empathy.
Previous fMRI research has identified relationships between the intensity of reported ego disillusionment experiences in certain areas in the brain. One of those areas was the parahippocampus, which mediates activity between the hippocampus and association areas in the cerebral cortex. As the diversity of connections decreased, depicted on the left, the intensity of reported ego disillusionment experiences increased. This finding could be related to the autobiographical sense of self, which is based in our memories and the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves. If there were fewer connections out of the hippocampus, we might have a harder time retrieving memories and information related to our sense of personal history. Another brain area that was found to be related to ego disillusionment was the salience network. The salience network is associated with attentional shifting and maintaining consciousness. If you're familiar with the gorilla attention experiment, then you'd know that initially the gorilla was not salient to individuals who were focused on watching the basketball. As the diversity of connections in the salience network decreased, the intensity of ego disillusionment experiences increased. This finding could relate to our embodied sense of self, which we monitor through internal and external experiences. If there are fewer connections in the salience network, then we may have a hard time switching our attention enough to feel grounded in our own bodies while tripping. This brings us to the end of our presentation. Thank you for your time. I've been Rob.
I've been Dava.